I wore the only nice dress I had left to watch my best friend marry the man who took everything from me. It was a good dress once. I had bought it for a different wedding, the one that was supposed to be mine. Now it hung a little loose, because there had been a lot of months where eating felt like something other people could afford. I sat in the second row from the back on the bride's side, where nobody would think to look. On my lap was a plain folder, the kind you buy in a pack of 25. I kept both hands flat on top of it, the way you hold down something that might get away from you. I was not there to stop a wedding. I was there to wait for one question. There is a line near the end of a ceremony, the one everybody has heard 100 times, the one nobody ever expects a real answer to. If anyone here knows a reason these two should not be joined, speak now. I had waited 11 months to hear a stranger in a robe say that sentence out loud. 11 months earlier, I had a house, a job I was good at, a name people trusted, and a best friend I would have died for. By the spring, I had none of those things, and the two people sitting up at that altar were the reason. They did not just take my fiance from me. They took the roof my mother left me and my good name with it. And then they told the whole town I had done it to myself. If you have ever been the quiet one, the one who keeps the peace so nobody has to feel uncomfortable, I need you to hear how this ends. Because I was that one for 34 years. I thought if I never made a fuss, the world would be gentle with me in return. I want to tell you about the house, and the forged signature, and the one thing they were too sure of themselves to check. My mother raised me in a narrow house on Delcott Street with a kitchen that never got warm. She cleaned other people's houses for a living and never once let me feel poor. When she got sick, I moved back in and did for her what I had watched her do for strangers her whole life. I washed her and read to her and paid the last of the bills after she was gone. The house was all she had to leave me, and she left it to me clean. No loans, no liens, the deed in a shoebox with her wedding ring. I know exactly what a clean deed is worth because making other people's paperwork bulletproof was my actual job. I was an escrow officer for 11 years at a title company 2 towns over. Was the person who caught the forged signature, the missing notary stamp, the name spelled 1 letter wrong. People signed the biggest purchase of their lives across my desk and trusted me to make sure nobody could ever take it from them. I was good at it because I believed the paper protected the person. That was the thing I believed. Right up until it was used to bury me, I met Daniel Vaughn at a closing of all places. He was buying a condo and charmed everyone in the room, including me, which almost never happened. He had a saying he liked, and he said it that first day, like it was a joke. Paper beats people, he said, tapping the stack on my desk. Every time I laughed then. I want you to remember that he said it because he says it again later. And the second time, nobody laughs. And then there was Claire. Claire Beaumont had been mine since we were 9 years old. When my mother worked nights, it was the Beaumonts 2 doors down who fed me. And Claire who taught me to braid my own hair. So the other kids would stop asking where my mother was. She was not my friend. She was the sister I got to choose. She was going to stand up beside me at my own wedding. She was a notary, in fact, at an insurance office by then. The little stamp and the ink pad and the book you have to keep. Keep that book in mind, too. Here is how they did it. And I only know it in full because I finally forced it into the daylight. That winter, my appendix nearly killed me. I was in St. Agnes Hospital for 6 days, 3 of them on a morphine drip with a plastic band around my wrist that I still have. While I was in that bed, someone sat across from Claire with my name and my mother's address and signed a home equity loan against my house for $70,000. $70,000 against the one thing my mother spent her life paying off. Claire notarized it. She wrote in her book that I had appeared in person, that she had checked my driver's license, that she had watched me sign. On a day she knew for a fact, I was unconscious in a hospital bed because she had sent flowers to the room. Daniel took the money, and the 2 of them took each other, and they did all of it in the same week. Did not find out for 4 months. I found out the way you find out the floor is gone. All at once in the dark, a default notice came to the house in my name for a loan I had never heard of. I did what I had trained 1,000 clients not to do. I stayed calm, and I assumed it was a mistake. And I tried to fix it quietly so nobody would be embarrassed. I called Daniel first because he still felt like mine to call. He was gentle on the phone, which should have warned me. He said we would sort it out and to let him handle the bank and not to make myself sick over it again. Then he stopped answering. Then Claire stopped answering. Then I drove to the bank with the deed in the shoebox and my mother's ring still in it. And I laid it on the desk and I found out how little a clean deed is worth once a forgery is wearing its clothes. The loan officer was kind, which was almost worse. She turned her screen toward me and showed me my own signature, and it was good. It was very good. Had the little hook on the end that I put there so signatures could not be copied. Someone had practiced it. Someone who had signed birthday cards next to me for 25 years. There was a notary seal beside it and a commission number, and the name Claire Beaumont, and the words personally appeared. I told the loan officer I had been in a hospital that day. I told her I could prove it. She said the notarization was the proof. That was the entire point of a notary, and a notarized document was presumed true unless a court said otherwise. I had spent 11 years telling nervous strangers that exact sentence to calm them down. Now it was a door closing in my face. I went to the police the way you were supposed to. The detective who took it was polite and tired. He made a call while I sat there, and when he hung up, his face had changed. He asked me carefully whether it was true that I had been having some emotional trouble since my mother passed. He asked whether it was true I had recently been let go from work. Neither of those was true yet, but I understood in that moment that someone had gotten there before me. Daniel had a way of leaning close to people and lowering his voice, and I could hear the shape of what he had said. She has not been herself since her mother died. She signed for the money and spent it, and now she is frightened and looking for someone to blame. Claire had told her own parents the same thing, the people who raised me. So when I went to them, to the closest thing I had to a family, Mrs. Beaumont held the door half closed and told me she thought it was best if I got some help. The fraud allegation reached my company before I did. You cannot be an escrow officer with a foreclosure and a forgery accusation attached to your name. The bond that let me handle other people's money would not renew. My manager cried when she let me go and told me it was not personal, it was the underwriters. 11 years and I carried out my own coffee mug in a copier paper box. I applied to every title company in 3 counties. The industry is small, and paper travels, and mine had a stain on it now that I had not put there. Nobody called back. The house went the way these things go, slowly, and then all at once. I could not pay a loan. I never took to save a house that was already mine. The morning they posted the notice on the door, I sat on the kitchen floor, my mother scrubbed on her knees, and I did not cry, because crying felt like it belonged to people who still had something to lose. The town picked a story, and it was the easy one. The easy story is always about the woman who fell apart, not the man who planned it. People I had known for years started finding the far aisle at the grocery store. I heard what they called me through a door at a party I was no longer invited to. Unstable, and there was Claire and Daniel out at dinner, engaged now, telling the version where they were, the ones being brave. The money was not the thing that broke me. Losing Claire was the thing that broke me. For a while, I kept a voicemail she had left me the year before, just to hear someone say my name like it was something good. I would play it in the car outside the room I rented by the week, with the engine off to save gas. One night, I understood that the person in that voicemail had been gone a long time, maybe longer than I knew, and I deleted it. And then I sat in the dark and did the kind of quiet math you should never tell anyone you did. I worked a night shift stocking shelves under a manager who called me the new girl for 3 months because he never bothered to learn my name. I let him. It was easier to be nobody than to be the woman from the story. There was one thing I did not sell, and I could not have told you why at the time. My mother's wedding ring and the shoebox, and inside it the useless clean deed, and folded under it the plastic hospital band from St. Agnes, with the date printed right on it. I kept the date. The ember was a piece of junk mail, if you can believe it. A refinance offer, addressed to the house, forwarded to my rented room by a post office that was more loyal to me than most people had been. I sat with that envelope for a long time because a refinance offer meant the loan was real, and recorded, and public, and I, of all people, knew exactly where a recorded loan lives. lives at the county recorder, in a book anybody can walk in and open. I had spent 11 years pulling documents out of that office to protect other people. I had never once pulled one to save myself. My mother did not raise a woman who lies down on a kitchen floor forever. She raised a woman who reads the fine print, so I stopped waiting for anybody to believe me and I went and got the paper myself. The next morning, I put on the escrow officer I used to be like a coat that still fit, and I walked into the county recorder and requested a certified copy of the deed of trust on my mother's house. Sada matters. Certified copy is the government swearing. This is exactly what we have, and no one can quietly change it later. I got it in 20 minutes for a few dollars, and I sat in my car and read the worst day of my life printed out like a grocery receipt. There was the $70,000. There was my practice signature. There was Claire Beaumont, commission number and all, swearing I had stood in front of her. And there at the top was the date. I took the hospital band out of the shoebox and laid it on the seat next to the deed. The same date. The day Claire swore I appeared before her with my driver's license. I was 200 miles of highway away with a tube in my arm and a nurse checking on me every hour. For the first time in a year, I was not holding my word against theirs. I was holding two pieces of paper that could not both be true. Now I could have run back to that tired detective waving my hospital band. The old me would have. But I finally understood the mistake I had been making. I had been asking people to believe me when I should have been making the system move on its own. A notary does not answer to the police first. Notary answers to the Secretary of State. And every notary in this state has to keep a journal, a bound book, with a line for every single thing they stamp. The signer signs that book in their own hand. In this state, the signer leaves a thumbprint in it too. There was no world in which my real thumbprint was in Claire Beaumont's book on a day I was under anesthesia. So I filed a formal complaint with the notary division, in writing with the certified deed and the hospital records attached. And I requested they audit her journal. I did not call Claire. I did not warn her. But I mailed it, certified, kept the green card when it came back with a stranger's signature, and I waited, somewhere across town. My sister, who was not my sister, was addressing wedding invitations, and a letter with a state seal was already in the mail to her, and only one of us knew it was coming. The payoff came in a thin envelope 6 weeks later. The notary division had opened a case and they had formally requested Claire produce her journal for the period in question. I read that letter in the grocery store parking lot on my break and I laughed out loud. Once, like a bark, a woman pushing a cart looked at me. I did not care, because I knew what was in that book, and I knew Claire knew, and I knew there was no clean way for her to hand it over. With the state moving, I went back to the police, but not to the tired detective. I wrote it up myself the way I would write a title report. Plain and numbered fact, then document, fact, then document. Identity theft, forgery, filing a false instrument, mortgage fraud. I attached the certified deed, the hospital records, the notary complaint, and the case number the state had already opened. You would be amazed how differently a police department treats a woman with a case number instead of a story. A detective named Ruiz called me 3 days later, and the first thing he said was that he had read all of it twice. The second thing he said was a question I had waited a lifetime to be asked. Why did nobody run the date before? There was still a hole in my case, and I knew exactly what it was. Paper proved the crime, but paper does not have a voice, and a good lawyer can blame a forged signature on a ghost. I needed one of them to say it, and Daniel, God help him, wanted to see me. He reached out through a cousin, all concerned, saying he hated how things had gotten and maybe we could talk before the wedding, clear the air. What he wanted was for me to sign a letter dropping my claims, so their marriage would start with a clean slate. He picked a coffee shop, a public one, on a Tuesday. In this state, the law only needs one person in the conversation to agree to it being recorded, and I was that one person. I put my phone on the table screen down next to my keys like a woman who had given up. 2. I let him talk. He was warmer than he had any right to be, and he slid a piece of paper across the table, and he asked me to just be the bigger person. One last time, be the bigger person. Those were the words they had used my whole life to get me to hold still. I asked him quietly why they had done it on that exact week, and he smiled, because he thought he had won. And men who think they have won cannot resist telling you how he said the timing was mine, not theirs. He said the hospital was perfect, that no one questions a sad woman, that Claire only had to stamp it and the bank did the rest. And then he tapped the table twice the way he had that first day at my desk. Paper beats people, he said. You of all people know that, I said. You were probably right. I picked up my keys and my phone and the little red dot that had been recording every word since before he sat down. I should have known they would not go quietly 4 days before the wedding. My case nearly died in a single phone call. Detective Ruiz called to tell me that Claire had informed the state her notary journal was lost. Lost. The one book with the thumbprint that was never mine, gone, reported, stolen from her car of all the sad and convenient things. Without the journal, Ruiz said, Claire could swear I really had stood in front of her and it would come down to a signature 2 experts could argue about for a year. I sat down on the edge of the rented bed and felt the floor tilt the way it had the day the notice came. For about 10 minutes I was the woman on the kitchen floor again, and then I was not. Because I had spent 11 years watching people try to make documents disappear, and I knew the first rule they never learn. A record is never only in one place. And months earlier, at the very start, I had done the one thing my whole career had trained me to do without thinking. A notary is not the only one who keeps a record, and the office where Claire worked kept its own copy of every document its notary stamped, scanned the day it was signed, in a system she could not quietly reach. Weeks before any of this reached her, I had sent the state a written request pointing them straight to that office. The copy was in their hands before Claire ever told anyone the book was stolen, so Claire had not destroyed the evidence. She had only put on the record that she wanted it gone. 4 days before her wedding, which is a very hard thing to explain to anyone. Her panic did not save her. It signed the case. Bees told me the arrests would come, but these things move slow and the district attorney wanted it airtight, and that could be weeks yet, meaning the wedding would go ahead on Saturday. The two of them smiling in front of everyone who had ever believed I was the crazy one. And I realized the courtroom, whenever it finally came, would be nearly empty. Our gray room, a few stranger. A verdict read to no one who had ever whispered my name in a grocery aisle. That was not where the lie had been told. The lie had been told at dinner tables and parties and church out loud to the whole town. So that is where the truth was going to be told. I was not going to stop their wedding. I was going to let them build the whole thing all the way to the top, and then let them ask the one question themselves. Which brings us back to the second row from the back and the folder on my lap and my 2 flat hands. The room was full of them, the Beaumonts in the front, Mrs. Beaumont in a hat, the same woman who had closed the door on me, half my old office neighbors from Delcott Street, the loan officer who had turned her screen toward me, though she did not know yet why her stomach dropped when she saw me. Daniel stood at the altar looking like the answer to a prayer. Claire came down the aisle in white on her father's arm, and for 1 second her eyes found me in the back and she stumbled, just slightly, and then she looked straight ahead and kept walking. She knew. She had known since the letter with the state seal, and she had bet that I was still too gentle to do anything but sit there and bleed. It was a beautiful ceremony. I let all of it happen. The vows, the ring, the readings, every word. I owed my mother that much patience. And then the officiant smiled and said the line, "If anyone can show just cause why these two may not be lawfully joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The room did. The little laugh a room always does. Nobody ever speaks. I stood up. 200 heads turned, and I heard my own name move through the pews like wind through wheat. There she is. That is her. I did not raise my voice. I had learned that from my mother, who never had to. I said, "I am not here to stop a wedding." I said, "I am here to answer the question honestly, since the two of them will not." Daniel said my name like a warning. Claire said nothing. I opened the folder. I said, "On the 10th of February last year, this man took $70,000 against my mother's house using my name." I said, "The woman in the white dress notarized it and swore in her book that I stood in front of her that day." I said I was in St. Agnes Hospital that day under anesthesia, and I have the band from my wrist and the records to prove it. A sound went through the room, low, like a hell breath let go. Daniel started toward me saying, "She is unwell, everyone. She has been through a lot." He had said it so many times it had always worked. So I set my phone on the little table beside the Unity candle, and I pressed play, and I let him argue with himself. His own voice came out of it, warm and certain, in front of every person whose respect he had ever wanted. No one questions a sad woman. Claire only had to stamp it. Paper beats people. You of all people know that the room went so quiet you could hear the candle. Mrs. Beaumont turned in the front row and looked at her daughter, and I watched a mother do the math I had done alone in a car a year before. Claire's face came apart. The way a signature comes apart when you finally look closely, and Daniel made his last mistake. The same mistake he had made all along. He reached for the phone to make the paper disappear. In a church, in front of 200 people, he lunged for the evidence. That is, when the man in the third row who I had asked to come stood up and showed a badge and said, "Son, I would leave that where it is." Detective Ruiz had wanted to see their faces, too. There was no wedding that day. There is no easy way to sign a marriage license while a room watches a woman in white find out who she married for. The arrests I had been promised came the following week. Only now half the town had witnessed the reason. Daniel Vaughn was charged with forgery, with filing a false instrument, and with mortgage fraud. And his own recorded voice made his lawyer's job nearly impossible. Claire Beaumont lost her notary commission that same month, and was charged as well. The false notarization pulled straight from her own office's files. The $70,000 loan was voided as fraudulent, lifted off my mother's house like a hand off a throat. I did not get the house back the day the lien died, because the bank had already sold it. But a court ordered restitution, and a year and a half later, when the little house on Delcott Street came up for sale again, I stood in a room and signed for it with my own hand, the real signature, on the end and all. I kept the shoebox on the mantle with the ring and the useless old deed and the hospital band, because some paper you keep, not because it is worth money, but because it tells the truth. I am a notary now, myself. I keep my book like it is scripture, and when a nervous stranger sits across my desk and signs the biggest thing they will ever buy, I tell them the truth I paid for. The paper only protects you if someone is willing to stand up and read it out loud. I saw Claire one more time across a courthouse hallway, smaller than I remembered. She started to say my name the way she used to, the good way. I did not stay to hear the rest. That is the one part that has not healed, and I have made a kind of peace with the fact that it might not. For 34 years, I believed that if I kept the peace, the world would be gentle with me. The world is not gentle with quiet people. It is only quiet around them. Paper does beat people. Daniel was right about that. So I stopped bringing my word to a fight and started bringing my file. If someone handed you a lie with your own name forged at the bottom and told you to be the bigger person and swallow it, would you swallow it, or would you finally stand up and read it out loud? Tell me in the comments, because I read every one of them now. If this held you to the end, stay with me and subscribe, and I will tell you another true one next time about a man who thought a signature could not talk back.